The starlight pavilion gleamed under the night sky, its glass walls reflecting the pulse of the city beyond. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of roses and expensive perfume, while laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes filled the room like a symphony. The annual Visionary Gala, a glittering spectacle that attracted the who's who of San Francisco, was in full swing. Tonight, it wasn't just a celebration. It was a performance, and everyone was playing their part. At the center of it all stood Adam Carson, the man everyone wanted to be and no one truly understood. Tall, impeccably dressed in a midnight blue tuxedo that seemed to have been tailored by a secret hand, Adam exuded power. His sharp jawline, framed by a stubble that spoke of effortless masculinity, was set in a look of detached grace. His eyes, dark, intense, skimmed over the crowd, observing, calculating, never lingering too long on any one person. Adam had built his empire from nothing. From a small tech startup in his 20s, he'd turned his dreams into reality, rising to become one of the wealthiest men in America. But the grandeur of the gala, the chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds and the elite conversations swirling around him, didn't fill the emptiness he'd learned to carry with him. As he took a slow sip from his glass, his gaze fell on the stage, where the host was preparing to announce his arrival. A voice crackled through the speakers, magnifying the usual grandeur of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host's voice boomed, "please welcome our keynote speaker for tonight, Adam Carson, the man behind the revolution of the tech industry and a philanthropist committed to making the world a better place." The applause thundered in the background as Adam made his way to the stage. He nodded politely, accepting the adoration, the accolades, the sheer worship that was lavished upon him as if it was his due. His career had earned him respect, admiration, even envy. But beneath the mask, he felt nothing more than an uneasy hollowness. He had all the wealth in the world, but in moments like this it felt like the loneliest place on earth. On the other side of the room, Emma Roberts stood near the bar, her eyes scanning the crowd with the calm of someone who belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. The Visionary Gala was a place of excess, and she had learned long ago to exist on the fringes of its glittering spectacle. She was not a socialite, not someone who could command attention with a look or a name. She wasn't here to rub elbows with the powerful. No, her mission was different. Tonight, she was here as a woman on a mission to make sure the world didn't forget the people who needed help the most. As she adjusted the strap of her emerald gown and watched the rich mingle around her, Emma's thoughts lingered on the children she worked tirelessly for in the nonprofit sector. The millions of dollars swirling in this room could make a monumental difference in their lives. But this world of champagne and high society, had never been her world. She could never quite embrace the ease of it, not when it represented so much of what she distrusted. She took a small sip of her wine and returned her gaze to the stage where Adam Carson stood. There he was, a figure of effortless elegance, the type of man whose presence could command a room without a single word spoken. He was a billionaire tech mogul, the personification of everything she had worked against in her own life. Wealth, power, influence. What did it really mean if the world's problems couldn't be solved with just a click of a button? "Emma," a voice called out, snapping her from her thoughts. She turned to find Rachel Winters, a former colleague from one of her earlier nonprofit ventures, standing beside her with a broad grin. "You're still standing here all by yourself?" Rachel teased, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Come on, let's mingle. Tonight's about connections, right?" "I'm just fine here," Emma replied with a soft smile. "I don't need connections. Not when I have work to do." Rachel rolled her eyes but didn't push. Instead, she casually pointed her glass in the direction of Adam, who was now speaking to a group of executives near the stage. "That's your golden ticket right there. The man who could make all your dreams come true with one donation. If anyone can fund your latest project, it's him." Emma's eyes narrowed slightly as she took in Adam's tall, commanding figure. "And why would he care about something like my project?" she muttered, half to herself. "He's too busy building his empire." Rachel chuckled. "He's not a robot, Emma. He's human. You just have to know how to talk to him." The night wore on, and Adam found himself growing restless. He had already made the rounds, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, and attending to the adoring fans who saw him as nothing more than an icon of success. But none of it satisfied him. He had learned long ago that the business world wasn't enough to fill the silence in his heart. It wasn't just the loneliness that stung. It was the hollow realization that despite everything, no one truly knew him. Then, in the midst of the sparkling crowd, he saw her, Emma. Her presence was magnetic, not in the way his world would have defined magnetism. She wasn't wearing a diamond-encrusted necklace or designer heels that screamed money. No, there was something else about her. Her emerald gown, understated yet elegant, complemented the fierceness in her eyes, the quiet strength in her stance. She stood at the edge of the crowd like someone who didn't belong but didn't care either. Adam's curiosity piqued, and as he moved closer, he overheard her mention a project, something about underserved youth, education, healthcare. His interest sharpened. How could someone so clearly different from him be so fascinating? When their eyes met, it wasn't the usual polished exchange of pleasantries he was used to. There was a quiet recognition, a flicker of understanding. For a brief moment, it was as if the world had paused. Emma tried not to stare, but something about the way Adam Carson moved, so effortlessly, so confidently, caught her attention. He wasn't like the other billionaires she'd encountered. There was an air of mystery around him, but it was more than just the wealth. It was something in his eyes that spoke of a different kind of loneliness. It was a hunger for something real, something that she could almost reach out and touch. She hadn't planned on speaking to him, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. As he approached, their eyes locked once more. "You're Emma Roberts, aren't you?" Adam's voice was smooth, warm, but it carried an underlying curiosity that caught her off guard. "Yes," she replied, smiling faintly. "I am." He looked at her for a moment, as though weighing something. Then, as if on a whim, he asked, "Do you believe people like me can change the world?" The question took her by surprise, but instead of answering immediately, Emma glanced down at his hand, at the gleaming ring on his finger, a ring that she had seen before, a ring that her mother had worn. "My mom has a ring like yours," Emma said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's almost identical." Adam froze, his dark eyes widening just slightly, as though a forgotten memory had resurfaced. And in that instant, something inside him shifted. The world around them, the gala, the crowd, the champagne, faded away, and all that remained was the woman standing before him, and the echo of something he couldn't yet understand. The moment Emma spoke, the room seemed to hold its breath. Adam's gaze never wavered from hers, his grip on his champagne glass tightening just enough to catch his attention. He hadn't expected this, didn't even know he was capable of being caught off guard. Her words hung in the air between them, charged with a quiet intensity. His mother's ring, the one he'd inherited after her untimely passing, had always been a part of his life, a reminder of something sacred, yet something lost. His mother had always kept it on her finger, never taking it off, not even when she was ill. The symbol of family, of legacy. And now, here it was, spoken out loud by this woman who, despite being worlds apart from his circle, seemed to hold something in her eyes that drew him in. "My mom has a ring like yours." The words echoed in his mind, and for a moment Adam's usual sense of control faltered. He stared at her, searching her face for some clue, some reason for the connection that his instinct told him was there. But she wasn't offering anything more, and for the first time in ages, Adam felt like an outsider to his own thoughts. "You've seen one like it?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of vulnerability he wasn't used to displaying. Emma nodded, her expression steady, but not without a touch of sadness. "It's funny," she said softly. "It's one of the few things my mother kept. Something she told me was passed down through generations." She hesitated for a moment as though deciding how much to share. "I was always told it was a symbol of love, of connection. My mother was never much for the luxuries in life. Her real wealth was in the family she kept, the way she helped others." Adam's mind raced. A ring that meant love, that symbolized connection? It was nothing like the image he'd carried of his own family legacy, the Carson name, which had been built on ambition, success, and yes, power. Love had always seemed like an afterthought, a secondary objective after wealth, after the empire. "I didn't know the Carson family was so sentimental," Emma said, the corner of her lips curving upward in a teasing yet knowing smile. "I would have thought the ring was more of a trophy than a token." Her tone, though light, hit Adam harder than he expected. It wasn't an accusation, but it felt like one. He didn't know how to respond. No one had ever challenged his family's legacy like this, at least not to his face. He had always been praised for his ability to rise above emotion, to rise above everything but the goal. But there was something in her voice, a quiet wisdom mixed with a knowing pain, that made him feel suddenly small. "I'm not sure what you mean," he managed, his voice betraying an uncomfortable shift in his demeanor. "Maybe you wouldn't," Emma said gently. She took a sip from her glass, her eyes never leaving his, as though she could see deeper than he wanted her to. "But that's not why I'm here tonight. You're not the only one with causes to fight for." The sudden mention of causes brought Adam back to the moment. He had almost forgotten where they were, the sprawling, opulent ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, the murmurs of high society behind them. In a place like this, people were usually only interested in his name, his wealth, his influence. It was rare that anyone, especially someone like Emma, could make him feel like he had something more to prove. Her words felt like a challenge, and Adam wasn't one to back down from a challenge. "So, what is it that you're fighting for?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Emma's face softened, her gaze drifting away as if collecting her thoughts. "I work with an organization that focuses on giving children in underserved communities the chance to build their future, whether through education, health care, or just a chance to belong somewhere. My mother believed in creating opportunities for people who didn't have them. She was always about action over words." Adam studied her as she spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but there was a weight to it, a sincerity that couldn't be faked. She wasn't like the women he knew, those who walked around parties with their agendas disguised in glamour. Emma was real, and in a world so full of facades, that struck him like a thunderclap. "Sounds like a noble cause," he said after a pause. The words felt hollow coming from his lips, and for the first time tonight he wasn't sure if he truly meant them. Her eyes met his then, an intensity in them that seemed to see past all the layers he had carefully built over the years. "It's not just noble," she said softly. "It's necessary." For a brief moment there was a silence that neither of them seemed willing to break. Around them, the noise of the gala continued, but it felt distant, almost irrelevant. There was something in the air between them now, something that was more than just their conversation. Emma shifted, turning her back to him slightly, as though unconsciously breaking the moment. Adam felt his chest tighten at the loss of her focus, but he couldn't push her back, not now, not after what she had just revealed. And yet, as he watched her slip away into the crowd, the question lingered in his mind. What was it about her that was so different from anyone else here? The evening wore on, but Adam could not shake the feeling that something had changed within him. He'd been so sure of his place in the world, so certain of the power he wielded. And yet, the briefest conversation with Emma had planted a seed of doubt. The ring, the causes she fought for, the quiet resolve in her eyes. As he moved through the gala, making his obligatory rounds, he realized that no one here could match the pull Emma had on him. She had spoken of love and legacy, of things Adam had buried beneath layers of business deals and board meetings. But tonight, it was as if the veil had lifted, if only for a moment. And in that fleeting moment, he was left wondering if there was more to life than the empire he'd built. He would have to know more about Emma Roberts. There was a part of him, a part he hadn't acknowledged in years, that needed to understand her. And that curiosity, that pull, was something Adam Carson had never allowed himself to feel before. As he continued to move through the night, Adam couldn't help but wonder, could Emma be the one to change everything? The next few days felt like a blur of meetings, conference calls, and charity dinners that Adam had grown so accustomed to. The rhythm of his life, always structured, always purposeful, had returned. And yet, a small crack had appeared in the veneer he wore so carefully, a crack that was hard to ignore. Emma Roberts. Her face, her voice, and the quiet strength in her eyes refused to leave his thoughts. In the weeks since the gala, Adam had buried himself in work, hoping the distraction would be enough to dull the memory of their conversation. But it didn't work. Every time his mind wandered, whether it was during a presentation or while sitting in his sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the city, his thoughts returned to her words, to that ring. He knew he had to see her again. It wasn't long before fate, or rather his assistant, Jenna, set things in motion. Jenna was always on top of everything, a no-nonsense woman who had been with him since the early days of his empire. If anyone could orchestrate a meeting, it was her. "Adam," she said, walking into his office with the same brisk energy she always carried, "I've set up a lunch for you with Emma Roberts. She's agreed to meet at the Blue Finch Cafe on Market Street tomorrow. I thought it might be a good idea to continue the conversation from the gala if you're interested." Adam didn't even hesitate. "Perfect. Set it up for noon." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to do this? I mean, Roberts is—" She paused, searching for the right words. "She's not exactly your usual crowd. No offense." Adam wasn't offended. He knew exactly what Jenna meant. Emma wasn't a socialite, wasn't part of the polished, exclusive world he inhabited. She wasn't a business partner, a client, or someone he could impress with a lavish dinner or a private jet. And that's what made the idea of meeting her again so compelling. "No offense taken," Adam replied, standing from his desk and moving toward the window. "Sometimes it's good to step out of the circle, Jenna. I think this will be good." The next day, Adam arrived at Blue Finch Cafe right on time, though he had no idea what to expect. The small cafe, nestled between two towering office buildings, had an eclectic charm. Chalkboard menus, mismatched chairs, and a sense of intimacy that couldn't be found in the marble-clad restaurants he typically frequented. It was the kind of place Emma would choose, he realized. Simple, unassuming, with a quiet warmth that contrasted sharply with his world of luxury and excess. When he walked inside, he saw her immediately. Emma sat at a corner table, her back to the wall, a single cup of coffee in front of her. She wore a simple blue blouse and jeans, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She looked real, human even. And for the first time in a long while, Adam felt the uncomfortable sting of his own pretenses. "Emma," he greeted, his voice softer than he expected. She looked up, her eyes locking with his. There was no smile, no pretense, just the same calm, direct gaze he remembered from the gala. The moment their eyes met, Adam felt his pulse quicken. It was that strange, magnetic pull again. "Adam," she replied, her voice steady, yet there was a slight hesitation in her tone. "You made it." "I wouldn't miss it," Adam said, sitting across from her. He didn't know why, but for the first time in a long time, the words felt genuine. She tilted her head, studying him for a moment before saying, "I wasn't sure if you were the type to actually follow through on something like this." "Is that a challenge?" he asked, a playful edge creeping into his voice. Emma's lips curled into a faint smile. "Maybe. But I've seen enough of the high-powered crowd to know when someone's just going through the motions." She glanced at the window behind him, her expression unreadable. "People like you don't usually sit in places like this, and it's not just about the money. It's about what you believe in." Adam's smile faltered, and he leaned forward, his gaze intensifying. "I believe in getting things done," he said, his voice low. "I've always believed in results, in making an impact." "Results?" Emma repeated, her eyebrows knitting together in mild disbelief. "Is that all you think about? Making an impact in the world? Or is it just about building your empire, about securing your legacy?" Her words hit him like a wave, and for the first time since their conversation at the gala, Adam felt defensive. Did she see him that way? Was he just another cold, calculating billionaire in her eyes? "I didn't think you'd be so cynical," he said, trying to keep his tone even. "You don't think people like me can do some good?" Emma paused, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "It's not that," she said finally. "It's just that your kind of good often comes with strings attached. People donate money, throw a gala, but it's never enough. They're doing it to make themselves feel better, not because they actually care." Adam sat back, stunned by the directness of her words. There was no sugarcoating, no polite small talk. It was just raw truth, and it was both disarming and deeply unsettling. "I'm not like that," he said, his voice quieter now. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on hers, his mind racing. "I've built everything I have from the ground up. I didn't take shortcuts. I don't do things for the applause, Emma. I do them because I want to see real change." Emma's eyes softened just a fraction. "Then why don't I see you putting everything on the line? Real change means sacrifice, Adam. It's not just about writing a check or throwing a fancy event." Her words hung in the air between them, and Adam's mind buzzed with a mixture of frustration and admiration. He'd never been challenged like this before, and part of him, against his better judgment, was intrigued. "I think you're wrong," Adam said, his voice firm. "I've done more than most people will ever know. But I can't make a real difference if I don't have the resources to back it up. You can't change the world with just passion, Emma." Emma's gaze dropped to her coffee, her lips parting in a quiet sigh. "I never said passion alone is enough, but without it, you're just another man in a suit." There it was, the unspoken truth he hadn't wanted to admit to himself. She was right. His wealth, his power, they had isolated him from the very thing he had started this journey for: meaningful connection. "You're right," Adam said softly, his voice carrying an unexpected weight. "But I'm willing to try if you'll help me." For the first time, Emma met his gaze without reservation. "I don't know if you're ready," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "But if you are, then we'll see where this goes." The conversation didn't resolve anything, but as they parted ways later, Adam knew one thing for certain. Emma Roberts had gotten under his skin in a way that no one else ever had. And if he wanted to prove her wrong, to prove to himself that he could be more than just his wealth, Then he was going to have to do something he'd never done before. Take a risk. And it was a risk he was willing to take. For her. The days that followed their lunch at the Bluefinch Cafe were a strange mix of anticipation and discomfort. Adam couldn't seem to shake the feeling that he was walking a tightrope, balancing between the world he knew so well, his empire, his legacy, and the world that Emma had shown him, a world of raw truths and unguarded emotions. He had tried to distract himself with work, but it was impossible. Every time his thoughts strayed from a meeting or a deal, they found their way back to her unwavering gaze, her challenge, and the softness of her words that seemed to pierce straight through him. Real change means sacrifice, Adam. It's not just about writing a check or throwing a fancy event. Her voice echoed in his mind, and each time the weight of her words grew heavier. He'd been used to controlling everything around him, to making decisions that affected thousands of people without giving them a second thought. But now, with Emma, nothing felt certain. She had a way of making him question everything he thought he knew about himself, about his life. It was late on a Thursday evening when Adam received a call that would change everything. He was at his penthouse, perched on the edge of his sleek modern sofa, papers scattered around him in an attempt to make sense of a financial report. The city lights flickered outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a cold, sterile glow over his apartment. Despite the opulence surrounding him, Adam felt colder than ever before. His phone buzzed, disrupting his thoughts. It was an unknown number, but the area code was familiar. He answered. "Adam?" a familiar voice said, and Adam's heart skipped a beat. It was Rachel Winters, his colleague and longtime friend. "You need to get to the Bridgewater Foundation. Now." "Why? What happened?" Adam's pulse quickened, a sudden sense of urgency creeping into his chest. "It's Emma. She's—" Rachel's voice faltered. "She's in trouble." Adam didn't wait for another word. He stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the marble floor. His mind raced. Emma had been working with the foundation on a project to secure funds for children's health care. Was something wrong with the donation she was overseeing? Had something gone wrong with the initiative? He grabbed his jacket, his thoughts spiraling out of control. Emma's challenge had been on his mind constantly, but now something darker loomed, something real, something he could no longer ignore. The Bridgewater Foundation was located on the outskirts of the city, tucked away in a small, quiet district that seemed a world apart from the glitz of downtown. When Adam arrived, he was met by Rachel, who ushered him into the building without a word. The tightness in her jaw and the hurried pace in her step told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't just about a donation going awry. Something far more serious was unfolding. They reached the foundation's main office, where a few staff members stood in tense silence. Adam's gaze searched the room, finally landing on Emma. She was sitting in the corner, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes red from crying. The sight of her, so unlike the composed woman he'd met at the gala, shattered something inside him. She wasn't just a challenge anymore. She was real, and she was hurting. Emma's head snapped up as Adam walked into the room. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a brief moment she seemed almost embarrassed to be seen in such a vulnerable state. "Emma?" Adam's voice was soft, unsure. "What's going on?" She wiped her eyes quickly, but it was clear she wasn't okay. "I didn't want you to see me like this," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want anyone to know—" Rachel stepped forward. "Emma's project was underfunded, Adam. The grant they were supposed to receive didn't come through. And now, without that funding, they're going to have to cut the healthcare initiative. The kids—" She stopped herself, clearly struggling to hold it together. "The kids are going to lose their medical support. And Emma. She's been working on this for months. She put everything into this. Now it's falling apart. Adam's stomach twisted at the words. A wave of guilt hit him unexpectedly. He'd spent years building an empire, raking in billions, but had never once asked himself what it was truly worth if it couldn't make a difference in the lives of people like these. "I'm sorry," Emma said, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean to drag you into this." Adam crossed the room, kneeling in front of her. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She flinched at the touch, as if expecting him to pull away at any moment. But he didn't. "You didn't drag me into anything," he said quietly. "I'm here because I want to help." Emma shook her head, her tears falling freely now. "This is my mess, Adam. I don't know how to fix it." But Adam, for the first time in a long while, knew exactly what he needed to do. He stood up, his chest tight with determination. "We'll fix it together." Emma looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. "What does that mean?" Adam glanced over at Rachel, who nodded grimly, clearly aware of the severity of the situation. "It means I'm going to make sure this project doesn't fall apart." Adam's voice was steady, resolute. "I'll personally match the grant and fund the entire healthcare initiative, whatever it takes." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "Adam, you don't have to do that. It's not about the money." "No," Adam interrupted gently. "It's not just about the money. It's about what you believe in, what you're fighting for. I'm willing to put my resources where my words are." There was a pause, a long, suspended moment where everything seemed to hang in the balance. And then, Emma did something unexpected. She stood up and wrapped her arms around him. For the first time in years, Adam didn't feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. In that embrace, he felt something shift inside him, a change that began deep within his chest. It wasn't just the money, or the project, or even his reputation. It was something far more personal. It was a connection, one he had never truly allowed himself to experience before. When Emma pulled back, her eyes were still filled with tears, but now they sparkled with something else. Hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Adam looked down at her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Don't thank me yet. We're just getting started." As they walked out of the office together, Adam felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. For the first time, he wasn't just doing something because it was expected. He was doing it because he believed in it, and, in a way, he was doing it for her, for Emma. And in that moment, Adam Carson knew that nothing in his life had ever felt more real. The weeks following Adam's decision to fund Emma's project were a blur of activity. The Bridgewater Foundation had quickly shifted gears, securing the necessary funds for the Children's Healthcare Initiative, and Emma had been at the forefront of it all. Her energy seemed boundless now, her confidence restored as the project moved forward, each step more successful than the last. Adam, for his part, had remained in the background, keeping his promises without fanfare, quietly transferring funds and providing support wherever it was needed. But despite the outward progress, a tension lingered between them, something that hadn't been there before, when they were simply two strangers at a gala. They had moved past the awkwardness of their initial meetings, but now a quiet unease grew between them. Adam had changed, that much was clear. But was it enough? Was he truly willing to embrace the vulnerability that came with real change? Or was he merely playing the role that Emma needed him to play? It was a crisp Saturday morning when Emma sent him a text, asking if he could meet her at the Oak Street Clinic, one of the facilities that was receiving funding for the project. She didn't say why, only that it was important. Adam's heart sank at the thought of any trouble, and he quickly arranged for his driver to take him there. When he arrived at the clinic, it was exactly what he had imagined, modest, functional, but full of life. Children ran through the small waiting area, their laughter bouncing off the walls, a stark contrast to the sterile, impersonal spaces he was used to. Emma was there, talking to one of the nurses, her back to him. As he approached, she turned, her expression immediately softening when she saw him. "Adam?" she greeted, her voice warmer than he had heard it in weeks. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his eyes searching hers for any sign of trouble. She nodded, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of hesitation. "It's fine, but I needed you to see this for yourself," she said, leading him through the clinic to a small room where a group of doctors and nurses were gathered, reviewing files. The walls were lined with photos of children, some smiling, others serious, all of them victims of circumstances beyond their control. "This is where the real work happens," Emma said, her voice quieter now. "These kids don't just need medicine. They need more than that. They need stability, care, a chance to grow, and you've given them that chance." Adam looked around, trying to process the weight of the moment. The clinic was far removed from the boardrooms, gala events, and luxury dinners that defined his world. There were no sparkling chandeliers here, no polished floors. Just people working together, doing what they could to make a difference in the lives of children who had never had a fair shot. He nodded, his throat suddenly tight. "I didn't do this alone, Emma. This was your work, your commitment. I just provided the resources." Her gaze softened, but there was something else in her eyes now, a shadow of doubt that Adam had seen before, but hadn't fully understood until now. "You've done more than that," she said quietly. "You've shown me something I didn't expect. But that doesn't change everything." The air between them thickened with unspoken words, the weight of their shared history pressing down. Emma took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm grateful for everything you've done, Adam," she began, her voice steady but serious. "But I can't ignore the fact that you're still you. Still the billionaire, the businessman who thrives on power. And I don't know if I can just stand by and watch you continue to live in that world, not when I've seen how it isolates you." Adam's heart clenched at her words, the truth in them sharper than anything he had heard in recent days. He had tried to change, had tried to be more than the image he had built of himself. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't enough. Maybe he had underestimated just how deep the divide was between the world he had always known and the one Emma had opened his eyes to. "I'm not sure what you're asking," he said quietly, his voice betraying a mixture of confusion and longing. Emma met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. "I'm asking if you're willing to leave it all behind, the control, the power, the empire. If you're willing to be more than just the man who writes checks and funds projects, are you willing to let go of that part of you that doesn't allow anyone to really get close?" The silence stretched between them, and for a moment, Adam didn't know how to respond. He had always been in control of his company, his investments, even his emotions. But the reality of what Emma was asking him, no, what she was challenging him to face, was something he had never allowed himself to truly confront. "I've been trying, Emma," he finally said, his voice raw with vulnerability. "I've been trying to be more, but I don't know if I can just walk away from everything I've built. I don't know if I even know who I'd be without it." Emma's face softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes that cut through him. "I don't want you to walk away from everything you've built, Adam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I need to know that you're not doing this because it's the next thing on your to-do list. I need to know that you're doing this because you've changed, because you see people like me, people like the kids here, as more than just a cause. I need to know that you're willing to let go of the part of you that's only ever been about winning." Adam stood there, his chest tight with emotion, the weight of her words settling into his bones. The room was quiet now, the only sound the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. He realized then that Emma wasn't just challenging him to change. She was challenging him to face the truth of who he had become and who he still had the potential to be. "I'm not perfect, Emma," Adam said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm trying. I really am." She nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving his. "I see that," she whispered. "But it's going to take more than trying. It's going to take something real." As they stood in the small clinic, the hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed to fade away, leaving only the silence between them, thick with unspoken possibilities. Adam's heart raced as he tried to process the enormity of her words. For the first time, he felt as though he was standing on the edge of something far greater than any business deal, any project, any empire. He was standing on the edge of something that could change him forever. And somehow, despite the fear that gripped him, despite the weight of everything he had built, he knew this was the moment that mattered most. For once, Adam Carson didn't want to run away from it. He wanted to face it head on, for her, for himself, for the chance at something real. Adam had never been one to linger in uncomfortable moments. He was a man who had always known how to navigate through his world, whether it was business, charity events, or social circles. He could read the room, adjust, and find his way. But standing in the clinic, the weight of Emma's words hanging in the air like an unspoken challenge, Adam felt something he hadn't in a long time: uncertainty. He had spent his entire life building a fortress around himself, brick by brick, stone by stone. His wealth, his empire, these were the walls he had carefully constructed to protect himself from vulnerability, from the messiness of human connection. And now, here he was, standing on the edge of a precipice, staring at something far more terrifying than any business deal or boardroom conflict. For the first time in his life, Adam didn't know how to control the situation. He didn't know how to fix it with money or power or even charm. This wasn't a problem he could solve with spreadsheets or strategy meetings. This was something deeper, something real. The days after their conversation were a quiet kind of torment for Adam. He couldn't stop thinking about what Emma had said, about the way she'd looked at him with both hope and caution in her eyes. She wasn't asking for grand gestures, for the type of man who could throw money at a problem and walk away. No, Emma wanted something else from him, something Adam wasn't sure he had the courage to give. He had tried to throw himself into work, but even in the midst of high-stakes meetings, something always pulled at his thoughts. The picture of Emma, standing in the clinic, her eyes so full of purpose and compassion, never quite left him. She was everything his world wasn't: real, raw, and vulnerable. The thought of her made him uncomfortable, and yet it also made him yearn for something he hadn't allowed himself to want in years. Connection. Real connection. It was a late Friday afternoon when Adam received an unexpected message from Emma. It wasn't an invitation to a meeting, nor was it a professional update. It was a simple text, one that made Adam's heart stutter in his chest. "Can we talk? I need to see you." His finger hovered over his phone for a moment before he quickly typed a response. "Of course, where?" He didn't have to wait long for her reply. "The Dandelion Cafe, 6 p.m. I'll be waiting." The Dandelion Cafe wasn't far from his office. An intimate little bistro known for its fresh flowers, eclectic decor, and a cozy atmosphere that felt like a far cry from the sleek, polished venues Adam was used to. It was the kind of place that spoke to Emma's authenticity, a place where the hum of the city seemed far away, and the only thing that mattered was the conversation in front of you. At 6 p.m. sharp, Adam found himself stepping through the doors of the cafe. The soft scent of jasmine greeted him, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed to vanish. There, at a small table near the window, sat Emma. She looked serene, but there was a heaviness in the way she held herself, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. When she saw him, her eyes lifted, and for a moment, Adam felt as though he had walked into a different world. Her gaze was softer now, more open, but there was an undeniable sadness in her expression. "Hi," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying an unfamiliar tenderness. "I'm glad you came." Adam didn't sit right away. Instead, he studied her, this woman who had shaken him to his core, who had asked him to question everything he had spent years building. "Of course I came," Adam replied, his voice low but steady. "What's going on, Emma?" Emma sighed, setting her napkin down. She gestured to the seat across from her. "Please sit down." Adam took his seat, his gaze never leaving her face. There was a vulnerability in her eyes now, a rawness that he hadn't seen before. It felt like the calm before. "I've been thinking a lot about what I said the other day," Emma began, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I've realized something that's been weighing on me." She paused, her fingers gently tapping the rim of her coffee cup. "I think I've been pushing you away." Adam frowned. "I don't understand. You've been nothing but open with me." Emma shook her head. "That's just it, Adam. I've only been open with you. I've been so focused on what you need to change, on what I need from you, that I never asked myself if I was really ready to let someone like you into my life." She looked up, her eyes meeting his with a sincerity that stole the breath from his chest. "I've been afraid. Afraid that if I let you in, I'd be just like everyone else in your life, someone who's only there for the picture-perfect moments, someone who can be discarded when things get too complicated." Adam's heart twisted at her words. For all the power he had in the world, for all the people who bent to his will, he realized now that he had never felt more disconnected than when he had watched Emma push him away. The thought of losing her, of being just another man who couldn't see beyond his own empire, gripped him with a fear he couldn't ignore. "I don't want to be like them, Emma," Adam said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to just be someone who shows up for the easy moments, someone who fixes things and walks away. I want to be the kind of man who stands by you, through all of it." Emma's gaze softened, but her expression was still clouded with doubt. "But you can't fix everything, Adam. Not with money, not with your empire. You can't buy your way into someone's heart. And I've spent so much of my life pushing away people who only wanted to fix things, make it better. But I'm not broken. I don't need fixing." Adam reached across the table, his fingers brushing lightly against hers. "I know that. I never wanted to fix you, Emma. I wanted to be there, to listen, to share something real with you." He swallowed, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking for a chance to be real with you." The air between them thickened, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Emma's eyes softened, the uncertainty still there, but now tinged with something more, something that for the first time Adam could recognize as hope. "I'm scared too, you know," Emma finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "Scared of letting someone in, scared of losing myself in someone else's world." Adam squeezed her hand gently, the words caught in his throat. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. This was the realest moment he'd ever known. And for the first time, he was willing to face whatever came next, no matter the cost. "I won't make you lose yourself," he said softly, his eyes locked with hers. "But I need to be with you, Emma. Not just in the good times. I want to be here, in all of it. For you." The silence that followed was different now, not full of tension, but of something else, something unspoken, something that could be if they were both brave enough to take the next step. And for the first time in a long time, Adam Carson felt like he was standing on the edge of something that wasn't just business. It was real. It was love. And no matter how terrifying that might be, he wasn't turning back. Not this time. The days after their conversation at the Dandelion Cafe were a mixture of quiet introspection and hesitant steps forward. Adam couldn't shake the feeling that things between him and Emma had shifted irrevocably. The walls he had built around himself, the ones that had once kept the world at bay, now felt almost suffocating. But there was something else, something deeper, that made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. Emma had given him a glimpse into a life, a world, that was grounded in something far more powerful than wealth, something he had spent his entire life overlooking: emotional depth. It was a challenge to everything he had known, a reminder that no matter how much success he had amassed, the real measure of a life was how deeply you could connect with another human being. But it wasn't going to be easy, and Adam knew that. It was late on a Tuesday afternoon when Adam received a call that would test everything he had been trying to build. His phone buzzed with the name Clara Hayes flashing across the screen. Clara, his ex-girlfriend, his former business partner, the woman who had never let him forget the perks of being with a billionaire, had a knack for knowing just when to reappear. Adam hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen for a moment, but curiosity got the better of him. He swiped to answer. "Clara," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral, though the tension in his chest was unmistakable. "Adam," Clara's voice purred, smooth as ever, but with a hint of urgency. "I need to talk to you. In person. There's something you need to know." Adam's stomach tightened. The last thing he wanted was another one of Clara's manipulative schemes, but he knew that ignoring her wouldn't make her go away. "Fine. Where?" "The Carlton," she replied quickly, her tone already suggesting she had something she wanted him to hear. "I'll be waiting." By the time Adam arrived at the Carlton, he knew that Clara's idea of talking was always more complicated than it seemed. The Carlton was a high-end hotel on the edge of the city, a place where deals were struck as easily as conversations were had. Adam had walked through its doors countless times before, but today, it felt different. He wasn't here to negotiate or close a deal. He was here for something more personal, something that had the potential to shake his world even further. As he entered the lobby, Clara was already waiting at a table by the window, a glass of champagne in front of her. She looked the same as she always did, perfectly put together with a confident, almost predatory air about her. "Adam," she greeted him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I knew you'd come. You always do." He sat down across from her, keeping his face impassive. "What is it, Clara?" Clara took a slow sip from her glass, as if savoring the moment. "I've been thinking about us," she began, her eyes never leaving his. "About everything we built together, the business, the connections. We had it all, didn't we?" Adam didn't respond right away. His mind was already on Emma, on the quiet strength she had shown him. He didn't want to be here, didn't want to entertain whatever agenda Clara was pushing this time. "Adam," Clara continued, leaning in slightly, her voice dropping to a lower, more intimate tone. "You've changed, haven't you? I can see it in your eyes. You've been spending time with that woman, Emma Roberts, haven't you?" The mention of Emma's name sent a jolt through Adam's chest. He had told Clara little about Emma, about their talks and the bond they were slowly building, but Clara had an uncanny way of sensing what he didn't want her to know. "I've worked with Emma on a project," Adam replied curtly. He wasn't about to let Clara bait him. "What's your point?" Clara smiled, her gaze never wavering. "My point is that you've been so caught up in that world with her, her causes and changes, that you're forgetting who you really are, Adam. You're forgetting us." Adam's pulse quickened. He didn't want to go down this path again, Didn't want to fall back into the easy transactional relationship he'd had with Clara. It had always been about what she could get from him, his power, his influence. The kind of connection Emma had started to offer was nothing like that. It was real. It was messy. It was terrifying. "I'm not forgetting anything," Adam said, his voice colder now. "I don't owe you anything, Clara. Our time together is over." Clara's smile faltered for the briefest moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "You think it's that simple? Adam, you need me. We both know it. You can't just walk away from everything you've built without some consequences. And if you think Emma Roberts is going to stand by you when you lose it all, then you're gravely mistaken." Adam's heart raced. The words cut deeper than he cared to admit. Clara's voice wasn't just about power or manipulation anymore. It was about something more. Fear. Her fear of losing control over him, of losing the grip she had on his life. "I've made my choices, Clara," Adam said, his voice firm now, though inside the conflict raged. "I'm not going back to that life. I don't want it anymore." Clara's eyes narrowed, her smile fading into something colder. "You think Emma will stand by you when you lose everything? When you face the consequences of being so reckless?" She pressed, her words like knives. "You're nothing without your empire, Adam. You're just another man chasing a dream." The weight of her words lingered in the air long after Clara stood up, leaving him alone at the table, a growing sense of doubt gnawing at his insides. Was she right? Was he really just a man chasing a dream? And if everything crumbled, would Emma stay by him? Or would she see him as another wealthy man whose life was all smoke and mirrors? His thoughts returned to the clinic, to the soft touch of Emma's hand in his, the way she had looked at him when he had promised to be there for her, no matter what. She had made it clear that she wasn't interested in his wealth, his power. She wanted something else from him, something deeper. But Clara's words were a reminder of his past, of the man he used to be, the man he feared he still was, deep down. Adam stood up abruptly, leaving the table and walking toward the exit. The cool night air hit him like a wave, but it did little to clear the fog in his mind. The questions that haunted him now weren't just about business or charity. They were about who he really was and what he wanted to become. And more than anything, Adam Carson knew that the only way forward was to face those questions head on. Not with money, not with power, but with something far more terrifying. Love. He needed to see Emma. He needed to understand whether she could truly accept the man he was becoming, or if he would remain forever tied to the empire he had built. The stakes were higher than ever, and Adam knew that only one thing mattered now: the truth. And Emma was the key to that truth. The following day, Adam's mind was a tangled mess of contradictions. He had spent the evening walking the streets of San Francisco, his thoughts swirling between Clara's words, his fear of losing everything, and the quiet, undeniable truth that had been gnawing at him since his first conversation with Emma. Was he really ready to leave the empire behind? Emma had already given him a taste of what it felt like to be part of something real, to be someone real. But could he give up everything he had worked for? His empire wasn't just a collection of buildings or stocks. It was a reflection of who he was, of what he had fought for. And yet, when he thought of Emma, of her kindness, her passion, he wondered if that was the life he wanted to build now. But Clara's warning echoed in his ears. "You're nothing without your empire, Adam. You're just another man chasing a dream." It was just after lunch when Adam decided to go to Bridgewater Foundation. He couldn't ignore it any longer, the gnawing feeling in his chest, the sense that he needed to make a decision. The moment had arrived. When he arrived, the familiar hustle of the foundation's offices felt both comforting and distant. People milled about, working together on different projects. But in the back of his mind, Adam couldn't stop thinking about the one project that mattered most to him now. Emma. She wasn't in her office when he arrived, but the receptionist directed him to the clinic project, the one Emma had poured so much of herself into. Adam's pulse quickened as he stepped into the back hallway, the walls lined with photos of the children they were helping, each face a testament to the power of what they were doing. And, as always, there was Emma in the middle of it all. He found her outside the conference room, bent over a set of papers, her brow furrowed in concentration. The moment she saw him, she stood up, her eyes immediately softening. "Adam," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I wasn't expecting you." "I needed to talk to you," Adam replied, his tone urgent but soft. "We need to talk." Emma glanced around the room, noticing a few other people working in the distance. "Let's go for a walk," she suggested, nodding toward the door. They exited the building, the crisp afternoon air biting at their skin as they stepped onto the sidewalk. The city was buzzing with its usual energy, but for Adam, everything felt muted. The only sound was the rhythmic tap of their footsteps on the pavement. "I didn't know if I should come," Adam started, his voice a little too stiff for the moment. He felt exposed, his uncertainty laid bare. "I've been thinking about everything. About us. About the way I've been living." Emma didn't speak immediately. Instead, she turned her head slightly, as if weighing her words. "I don't know if this is the right time for me to hear this," she said carefully. "You've been saying a lot, Adam. You've been giving. You've been changing. But there's something you need to understand. It's not just about what you give. It's about what you're willing to do. What you're willing to become." The words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. He had spent so much time proving himself in a world that valued power and wealth above all else that he had almost forgotten how to simply be. With Emma, he wasn't expected to be the powerful billionaire. With Emma, he was just Adam. But had he been brave enough to live up to that, to let her see the real man behind the walls? He stepped closer to her, his voice low. "I'm not the same man you met, Emma. I thought I was, but I'm not. I can't keep pretending I don't want something more, something real." Emma looked at him, her eyes unreadable for a moment. The air between them crackled with a tension neither of them could ignore. "It's not that simple, Adam," she said, her voice softening but firm. "I know you want to change. I know you want to be someone different. But you need to ask yourself why. Why is it that you want to walk away from everything you've built? Why does that matter to you now?" Adam opened his mouth to respond, but the words stuck in his throat. Why? Why did it matter so much? What was it about Emma that made everything he'd known feel so hollow? He had everything, every material possession, every accolade, but none of it had ever made him feel this way. None of it had ever made him feel alive. "I don't want to be alone anymore," Adam said, the words finally coming out in a rush. "I've spent so much time building an empire, but it's been nothing but empty noise. I look at you, Emma, and I see something I've never seen before. Something real." Her face softened, but there was still a caution in her eyes. "That's the hardest thing, Adam," she replied. "I'm not sure I can teach you how to be real, not if you keep wanting to run away from your past. You can't just discard everything because it's easy. You need to decide who you want to be, with everything." Adam's heart hammered in his chest as he realized the gravity of her words. The empire, the wealth, the power. Those weren't the things that defined him. It was his choices. And he had a choice to make now, one that would define everything. Not just for him, but for her, for the future he could have with her. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his, his touch both tentative and sure. "I don't want to walk away from everything, Emma. I want to walk with you, whatever comes next. I don't have all the answers, but I know I don't want to keep living this life if it means I'm not living for something real." She looked down at their hands for a moment, as if contemplating his words. Her fingers tightened around his, and when she met his gaze again, her eyes were clear. "Then let's take it one step at a time, Adam," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "But you need to understand, I'm not here to save you. You need to save yourself." Adam nodded slowly, a weight lifting off his shoulders that he hadn't even realized was there. This wasn't a solution, not yet. But it was a beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Adam Carson felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. With Emma. Not because of what he could give, but because of what he was finally ready to receive. As they walked back toward the foundation's entrance, the world around them felt different. Not easier, not simpler, but more real. And in that reality, Adam knew one thing for certain. No matter what came next, he would never turn back. Not now, not ever, for Emma, for them, for the chance at something more. The following weeks passed in a haze of progress and uncertainty. Adam had thrown himself into his work with a new kind of focus, not driven by the need to prove himself, but by the desire to make a difference. He had met with Emma several times, each encounter feeling like a step forward and a step deeper into the labyrinth of his own emotions. The walls he had so carefully constructed around his heart had begun to crumble, and though the vulnerability terrified him, it also felt right. With Emma, everything was raw and unpolished, and in that rawness, Adam found a kind of truth he hadn't known he'd been searching for. But as much as he wanted to embrace the life Emma had opened his eyes to, he knew he was still tethered to the empire he had built. The weight of his decisions, the responsibilities of his business, and the people he had to answer to, those things loomed over him like a shadow, threatening to pull him back into the world he was trying to escape. It was a Friday afternoon when Adam received a call from Jenna, his assistant. Her voice was tight, as though something urgent had come up. "Adam, there's a situation with the board," she said, her tone serious. "They're pushing for a major expansion deal, one that could take the company in a new direction. They want your approval to move forward, but I'm not sure they're aware of how much you've been distracted lately." Adam leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the polished wood of his desk. "What kind of expansion?" he asked, his mind already racing through possibilities. "It's a merger, Adam, a huge one. If it goes through, it'll increase the company's holdings exponentially. But the backlash from the media could be—" Jenna trailed off, the weight of the situation settling between them. "Give me the details," Adam replied, his voice steady but with a faint edge of frustration. He had made it clear to the board that he was focusing on long-term sustainability, not short-term gains. But now it seemed like his own empire was threatening to pull him back into a game he no longer wanted to play. Later that evening, Adam met with his business partners in a sleek, high-rise conference room overlooking the bay. The board was restless, eager to push forward with a deal that promised vast returns. They spoke with enthusiasm about the merger's potential, the billions it could bring, and the new markets they would dominate. As the conversation moved forward, Adam couldn't help but feel detached. Their words felt hollow, their excitement fueled by the numbers on the spreadsheets in front of them, but Adam was no longer sure that was enough. "We're talking about a merger that will redefine the industry," Gregory, one of his longtime partners, said eagerly. "This is our chance to leave a legacy, Adam. Don't let personal matters get in the way." The words hit harder than Adam expected. Personal matters. That was how they viewed his desire for change. Something personal, not a legitimate shift in priorities. He had tried to separate his personal life from his business decisions, but now, more than ever, the lines between the two were blurring. His conversations with Emma, their growing bond, had opened his eyes to a reality where the pursuit of power and wealth wasn't the only thing that mattered. But was it enough? "I need time to think," Adam said, his voice cutting through the excited chatter. "This is a big decision, and it's not one I'm going to make lightly." Gregory shot him a sharp look. "You're the CEO, Adam. Your decision is the final one. Don't let your personal life cloud your judgment." As Adam walked back to his car, the weight of the meeting followed him like a dark cloud. The path before him was clear: sign the merger, secure the company's future, and continue to build his empire, or walk away from it all, take the risk, and truly change his life. But walking away from everything was no easy choice. The empire he had built had cost him more than he cared to admit. Years of isolation, years of burying his heart beneath layers of success. That night he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at a crossroads. On one side was the life he had always known, the wealth, the power, the respect of his peers. On the other side was Emma, the world she had shown him, a world of authenticity and human connection. He could feel it in his bones that choosing one path meant losing the other. The next day, Adam called Emma. He needed to see her, to talk. The weight of his decision was bearing down on him, and he knew that the only person who could help him find clarity was her. They met at the Oak Street Cafe, the same place where their conversations had begun. Simple, quiet, with a sense of normalcy that Adam craved more than he had ever admitted. Emma arrived first, her warm smile lighting up her face when she saw him. As always, she looked effortlessly beautiful, but it was her presence, her calm, that made Adam feel like he could breathe again. "Adam," she said softly, standing as he approached the table. "It's good to see you." "Likewise," Adam replied, his voice carrying a weight he couldn't disguise. He sat down across from her, his hands resting on the table. "There's something I need to tell you, something I need your help with." Emma raised an eyebrow, her eyes full of curiosity. But there was something else there, a concern. "What's going on?" Adam paused, trying to find the right words. He had never been good at articulating his emotions, but with Emma, it felt more important than ever to be honest. "I'm at a crossroads, Emma," he said, his voice quieter now. "I'm being asked to make a decision that could change everything. The board wants me to approve a merger, and it would expand the company, make us even bigger than we are. It's a chance to cement my legacy, but it feels empty, like I'm just building for the sake of building." Emma's gaze softened, and she leaned forward, her voice gentle but direct. "What do you want, Adam?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, Adam allowed himself to truly answer. "I want to be something more, Emma. I don't want to be known just for what I've built. I want to be known for who I've become." His voice cracked slightly and he exhaled, the weight of his words hanging between them. "But I don't know if I'm ready to walk away from it all, to walk away from the life I've spent so many years creating." Emma's expression softened further, and she reached across the table, her hand gently resting over his. "Adam, you don't have to walk away from everything, but you do have to decide what matters most. What you want to build, your legacy, your empire, your happiness, is it built on power or on love, on control or on connection?" Adam felt a lump form in his throat as her words sank in. He had spent so long chasing after success, after control, after validation. But now, standing at this moment, he realized something he hadn't before. What he really wanted wasn't the empire. It was the connection he shared with her. "I don't want to choose between you and my work," Adam whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I want both. but I don't know if that's possible." Emma gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "Then maybe the question is, can you build a life where both of those things can exist? Where you don't have to sacrifice what you've built, but you don't lose yourself in it either?" Adam sat back, the weight of her words heavy on his chest. Maybe it was possible. Maybe it wasn't about choosing between one life and another. Maybe it was about building something new altogether. A life where love and ambition didn't have to be at odds. And for the first time in a long time, Adam felt something shift inside him. A quiet hope, a desire to move forward, not away from his past, but alongside it, creating a future that was real. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of the crossroads. He was ready to cross them. With her. The week after their conversation at the Oak Street Cafe felt like an uncharted territory for Adam. For the first time in his life, he had allowed himself to be truly vulnerable, to expose the parts of him that he had hidden for years, his insecurities, his longing for something more meaningful than just wealth. And Emma, with her quiet wisdom and unwavering support, had given him the clarity he had been seeking. But while the future seemed filled with promise, the past still loomed large, casting its shadow over every decision he made. Adam couldn't shake the feeling that he had to confront the ghosts of his past before he could fully embrace the life he wanted with Emma. His father's influence, the empire he had inherited, and the legacy of cold ambition that had been passed down to him. It all weighed heavily on him. As much as he wanted to walk away from it all, he knew that to truly change, he had to understand the foundations of the man he had become, and that meant facing the painful truth about his family. It was late one evening when Adam found himself standing in front of the large, imposing Carson Enterprises headquarters. The building stood as a monument to everything he had worked for, everything his father had built. The glass windows reflected the golden hues of the sunset, casting long shadows over the city streets below. The sight was beautiful, but it felt suffocating now, a reminder of the weight he had been carrying for far too long. He took a deep breath, feeling the familiar pressure of his shoulders, the burden of his family's legacy pressing in on him. He had spent years running from the emotions this building brought up, but today it felt like he had no choice but to face them. He entered the lobby and headed straight for the elevator. His destination was his father's office, the one place in this building that had always felt like a symbol of power, of control, the place where he had been groomed to take over, where his father had taught him the harsh realities of business. It had been his father's world, and Adam had been forced to live in it. But now, as the elevator ascended, Adam felt a strange sense of purpose. He wasn't here to ask for permission or to bow to the legacy his father had built. He was here to take control of his own story. When the elevator doors opened, Adam stepped into the familiar office, its dark mahogany furniture and leather chairs unchanged. The view from the window was as breathtaking as ever, the sprawling city below bathed in the warm light of the setting sun. But it was the desk that caught his attention, the desk where his father had sat for years, making decisions that shaped the future of Carson Enterprises. Adam walked to the desk, his fingers grazing the surface of the polished wood. He could almost hear his father's voice commanding, dictating the course of their lives with every word he spoke. But now, there was only silence. And that silence, for the first time in his life, was deafening. He sat down in the chair, feeling the weight of the history that had been built around him. It was strange. This place, this office, had always been a symbol of power, of everything he had worked for. But now, it felt empty. He wasn't sure if it was the ghost of his father that lingered here, or if it was the realization that all of it, the wealth, the empire, had come at a price he could no longer afford to pay. As Adam sat there, a sense of clarity began to wash over him. He had spent his whole life trying to live up to the expectations set by his father, trying to fill the shoes of a man who had valued power above all else. But as he thought of Emma, of the connection they shared, he realized that the only legacy worth pursuing was one built on something more meaningful than financial success. He didn't want to be the man who sat in this office, distant and detached, living a life devoid of emotional depth. He wanted something real, something that wasn't defined by his wealth or his family's name. With a sigh, Adam stood up and walked to the bookshelf across the room. There, amidst a collection of his father's personal books, he found what he was looking for: an old journal. It had been tucked away, as though his father had wanted to hide it from him. Adam opened it, flipping through the pages, and found what he had been searching for: a note written in his father's hand, detailing his thoughts on success, on legacy. Adam's eyes scanned the words. "Success is the only thing that matters, Adam. Everything else is a distraction. The world will never remember your kindness or your love. They will only remember what you build. The empire is everything." The words hit Adam like a punch to the gut. He had spent his whole life trying to live up to this singular, empty belief. But now, reading these words, he felt the weight of the lie he had been living. He had followed in his father's footsteps, believing that power and wealth were the only measures of success, but now he saw how hollow that path had been. Adam closed the journal and placed it back on the shelf, his mind racing. He wasn't going to be the man his father had wanted him to be. He wasn't going to live for the empire or for the world's expectations. He was going to build something different, something that was based on love, on human connection, on the things that truly mattered. As he walked toward the door, Adam's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a message from Emma. "I've been thinking about you a lot today. I don't want you to make any decisions alone. Call me when you can. We need to talk." The message sent a jolt of warmth through his chest. It was the kind of message that made him feel seen, understood. Emma had always been there for him, and now, more than ever, he realized how much he needed her. Not just for the support, but for the understanding, the acceptance she offered, something that he had never truly had before. Adam smiled to himself, feeling a sense of purpose that had eluded him for years. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he was ready to face it. Not as the billionaire heir to Carson Enterprises, but as the man he was becoming. A man who could finally choose love over legacy, connection over empire. And with that thought, Adam left his father's office behind, forever. That evening, Adam called Emma. The uncertainty that had plagued him for so long was gone now. He was ready. Ready to take the next step with her. Ready to build a life that was his, not just the inheritance of a name. "Emma," he said when she picked up, his voice steady and full of determination. "I'm ready. I'm ready to walk this path with you, whatever it looks like." The silence on the other end of the line was brief, but then he heard her soft, relieved sigh. "I've been waiting for you to say that," Emma said, her voice warm with emotion. "We'll figure this out together, Adam, one step at a time." And for the first time in his life, Adam Carson knew that the path ahead wouldn't be defined by wealth or legacy. It would be defined by love. And for the first time, that was enough. The morning after Adam's call to Emma, the world seemed both vast and small. The city sprawled out beneath him as he stood on the balcony of his penthouse, watching the sun rise over the skyline. San Francisco had always been a city of possibilities, endless potential wrapped in the gleaming glass of its towering skyscrapers. But for Adam, the possibilities now felt different. They weren't about buildings or numbers. They were about choices, choices that would define the rest of his life. He had always prided himself on making the right decisions, on maintaining control. But as he gazed out over the city, he realized how little control he had over the things that truly mattered: his relationships, his heart, his future with Emma. The conversation with his father's journal still lingered in his mind, its harsh words echoing in his thoughts. Success is the only thing that matters. The world will never remember your kindness or your love. Adam had spent years trying to live up to those words, pushing aside the messy human parts of life for the clean, sterile comfort of wealth and power. But he was done. Done with living for the wrong reasons, done with hiding behind the empire his father had built. Now, for the first time in his life, Adam Carson was ready to face the uncertainty of a life that didn't rely on business deals and stock prices. It wasn't long before Adam found himself at Bridgewater Foundation again, standing outside the building where Emma had poured so much of herself. He had spent the past few days thinking about what he had to offer her, what he could bring to this partnership. He knew it wasn't just his wealth or the status of his name that mattered. It was his willingness to be vulnerable, to embrace the very things he had spent his life avoiding. As he stepped through the door of the foundation, a sense of calm washed over him. The hustle of the office felt distant now, the hum of phones and computers seeming almost irrelevant in the face of what he was about to do. This time, he wasn't here to discuss business or make a donation. He was here to be with Emma, to show her that he was ready to walk this path with her, not as the CEO, not as the billionaire, but as a man who wanted to build something real. Emma was in her office, tucked away in the back corner of the building, just like she always was when she was working on something important. The moment Adam walked in, she looked up from her papers and smiled, that warmth he had come to cherish lighting up her face. "Adam," she greeted, standing up from her desk. "I wasn't expecting you today." He walked towards her, his heart pounding in his chest. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," he began, his voice steady, though there was an underlying vulnerability in it. "About everything, about the future, about what matters." Emma's eyes softened, and she moved to stand closer to him. "What have you decided?" Adam inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the question pressing against his chest. This was the moment he had been preparing for, the moment that would define everything. He reached out, taking her hands gently in his. "I've decided that I want to build something with you, Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for you, not just because of you, but with you. I want to be the man who stands by you, not because I feel obligated, but because I believe in what we can do together." Emma's breath caught, and for a long moment she didn't say anything. Her hands tightened around his, as if she was trying to ground herself in the reality of his words. "I don't want to just give you money or make a donation," Adam continued, his voice raw with sincerity. "I want to be part of this, your world. I want to be the man who is by your side in every way. I'm ready to let go of the past, Emma. The empire, the business, all of it, because none of it matters if I can't have a future with you." Emma blinked rapidly, as if fighting back tears. She pulled her hands from his and took a step back, her eyes searching his face, trying to read him. "Adam," she whispered, shaking her head slightly, "you don't have to give up everything. You don't have to walk away from your past just to be with me. I never asked you to do that." "I know," he said softly, taking a step closer to her. "But I need you to know that I'm ready to build a future. With you. I'm not asking you to wait for me to change. I'm asking you to walk forward with me, no matter what comes." Emma's eyes softened as she gazed at him, her hand reaching up to gently touch his cheek. "I've never asked you to choose, Adam. You don't have to abandon your work, your legacy. But what you do need to understand is that I'm not just another chapter in your story. I'm not a side project, a distraction. I need to know that you're not just saying this because it's what you think I want to hear. I need to know that you're doing this because you want it too. Adam took a deep breath, his chest tight with the weight of her words. I'm not doing this for you, Emma, he said, his voice soft but resolute. I'm doing it for me, for us. I've spent my whole life trying to live up to someone else's expectations, my father's, the board's, everyone's. But now, for the first time, I'm choosing what I want, and what I want is you. The silence between them grew thick, but it was a comfortable silence, a moment of truth that neither of them could ignore. Emma's eyes shimmered with something Adam couldn't quite place, hope, maybe, or disbelief, but it was clear that his words had struck a chord with her. Finally she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Adam, I don't want to lose you. I don't want to be just another part of your life you try to fit in when it's convenient. But I also can't walk away from this. This change, this feeling that we're moving towards something real, something right. Adam smiled, a sense of peace washing over him. You won't lose me, Emma. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Not this time. As Emma moved closer to him, she wrapped her arms around his neck, her breath warm against his skin. Adam's heart beat a little faster as he held her close, finally feeling the peace he had been searching for. The world outside could continue to spin, but in this moment, he knew that everything he needed was right here. Together, they would face whatever came next. Together, they would build something new, something real, something lasting. And as Adam Carson held Emma in his arms, he finally understood what it meant to choose love over legacy, connection over power. And he knew with every fiber of his being that this was the future he had been meant to create all along. The following weeks were a whirlwind of decisions. Adam had finally made his choice. He wasn't going to let his father's legacy dictate his future. The board had been stunned by his announcement, his intention to scale back the company's operations, reinvest in local communities, and focus on sustainability rather than profit-driven expansion. For years he had built Carson Enterprises on the principle that wealth and power were the ultimate goals, but now he was turning it all on its head. He couldn't help but think of Emma. She had always told him that true change didn't happen overnight, that it was a process. And as he poured his energy into reshaping his company's future, he realized how right she had been. Change wasn't just a choice, it was a commitment, a constant evolution that required vulnerability, patience, and a willingness to let go of the very things that once defined him. But despite his newfound sense of clarity, Adam felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The board was furious, his business partners questioning his motives. They had built their empire on the very principles he was now dismantling. To them, Adam was not just risking money, he was risking everything. One morning, Adam found himself sitting at his father's old desk, his father's empty chair across from him. The office was quieter now, the sharp, sterile atmosphere that had once filled the space now replaced by a soft stillness that made the weight of his decisions even heavier. Adam. The voice startled him, and he looked up to see Rachel Winters, his trusted business advisor, standing in the doorway. There was a sharpness in her eyes that told him she wasn't here to chat about progress. Rachel, Adam said, leaning back in his chair, what's going on? Rachel stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She didn't sit down. Instead, she stood with her arms crossed, her posture rigid. You're playing with fire, Adam. I get that you want to make a statement, but this isn't just about you anymore. It's about the company, the people who rely on you. You can't just throw all of that away for some idealistic dream. Adam swallowed, his fingers tapping against the edge of the desk. He had heard this before, but hearing it from Rachel felt different. She had always been pragmatic, steady, the one person who had never questioned his ambition. "I'm not throwing everything away, Rachel. I'm reorienting the company. We can still be profitable, but we're going to do it with integrity." She shook her head, the sharpness in her voice matching the tension in her posture. "And you think Emma is going to be enough to make this work? She's a great cause, but she's not your business. This—" She gestured broadly to the office around them. "This is your legacy. This is what people expect from you. This is where you make your mark." Adam's pulse quickened. "It's not just about legacy, Rachel. Not anymore. I've been so focused on leaving a mark that I forgot to live the way I wanted to. I've forgotten that this," he motioned around the room, "isn't the end-all be-all. I'm done running a business just for power. It's time for a change." Rachel stood still for a long moment, her gaze fixed on him, almost as though she were waiting for him to backpedal, to take it all back. But Adam didn't. He couldn't. Finally, Rachel spoke, her voice quieter now but laced with concern. "You've been with Emma for, what, a few months? You're going to let her, someone who doesn't understand this world, define your future?" Adam felt a rush of heat in his chest. "You think that's what this is? That I'm doing this for her? No, Rachel, I'm doing this for me. For us, for all of us, for the future I can create, one that's more than just money and power. I'm not abandoning Carson Enterprises. I'm saving it from itself." Rachel's eyes softened just a fraction, but her tone remained firm. "You're walking a fine line, Adam. The board won't just roll over. They'll fight you every step of the way. And if this doesn't work, you'll lose it all." Adam's heart tightened at the thought. He had known this was coming. The risk, the uncertainty. But the thought of living without the chance to be something more, to build a future with Emma, to break free from the legacy of his father's empire, was the one thing that kept him grounded. "I understand the risks, Rachel," Adam said, standing up now, his voice steady but filled with the weight of everything he had chosen. "But I'm willing to take them. I'd rather lose everything trying to build something real than stay in a world that doesn't serve anyone but the few at the top." Rachel didn't respond right away. Instead, she studied him carefully, as though deciding whether to argue further. Finally, she spoke, her voice resigned. "I can't make that decision for you, Adam. But remember this. If it all falls apart, I'll be here to pick up the pieces. I always have been." Adam nodded, the weight of the conversation sinking in. He knew what he was risking, and there was no turning back now. "I appreciate that, Rachel, but this time I have to make the decision myself." That evening, after another long day of meetings and phone calls, Adam sat in the quiet of his apartment, thinking of Emma. He hadn't told her everything yet, not about the pressure from the board, the uncertainty that lingered. But he needed to. She had been his anchor through all of this, and it was time to be honest with her about the challenges they were facing together. He dialed her number, his heart fluttering as the phone rang. When she picked up, her voice was warm and familiar, as comforting as it always was. "Adam, you're late tonight." "I know," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've been thinking about everything, about what's next." Emma was quiet for a moment, as if she knew exactly what he was about to say. "Tell me." "I'm not sure I can keep doing this, Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The company, the pressure. The board won't accept my changes easily, and I'm starting to realize that everything I've built might crumble if I push too hard. I'm not afraid of losing the empire, but I don't know if I can protect it and still be the man I want to be." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Adam felt his breath catch in his throat. He knew that this conversation was pivotal, that it could change everything. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice soft but filled with resolve. Adam, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be real. I know this isn't easy, but no matter what happens, we'll figure it out together. You don't have to do this alone." Adam's heart swelled with relief, the tightness in his chest easing. For the first time in a long time, he realized that no matter what happened with the board, with the empire, or with the future, he wasn't alone. He had her, and that in itself made all the difference. "I'm ready," he whispered. "I'm ready to face whatever comes next, with you." As Adam hung up the phone and looked out over the city, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. No matter how uncertain the road ahead was, he knew one thing for certain. He had finally found a path worth walking. Not alone, but with Emma by his side. And for the first time, that was enough. The following days were a delicate balance of optimism and anxiety. Adam had told Emma everything, the pressure from the board, the looming threat of losing everything he had worked for, and his fear of not being able to balance the world he had created with the life he wanted to build with her. Emma had listened without judgment, her support unwavering, her faith in him a constant source of strength. But despite her words of reassurance, Adam couldn't escape the nagging doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. The empire he had built was teetering on the edge, and the consequences of his choices were beginning to unfold in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. The board meetings had become more heated, the murmurs of discontent growing louder with each passing day. The shift in his priorities, his newfound focus on sustainability and integrity, had been met with skepticism and outright resistance. For years, Adam had played the role of the calculating businessman, the one who made decisions with precision and confidence. But now, as he stood at the helm of a company that was starting to push back, he realized that the man he had become was no longer just defined by profit margins and bottom lines. He was changing, evolving, and the very people who had once respected him were now questioning his ability to lead. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Adam sat across from Gregory in the sleek, glass-walled boardroom. The tension in the room was palpable, the quiet hum of the air conditioning. The only sound as Adam and his longtime business partner exchanged looks. Gregory's sharp eyes were filled with frustration, and Adam could feel the weight of his gaze, like an accusation. "You're playing a dangerous game, Adam," Gregory said, his voice low but firm. "I get it. You want to make a difference, leave a legacy, but you're jeopardizing everything we've built. The merger is critical. It's not just about money. It's about survival. You're pushing us into a corner with these new policies. The board doesn't support this." Adam clenched his jaw, the old tension between them rising again. Gregory had always been the pragmatic one, the voice of reason in their partnership. But Adam couldn't help but feel a growing distance between them, like they were speaking different languages. He wasn't interested in survival anymore, not if it meant sacrificing everything he cared about. "We're not just surviving, Gregory," Adam said, his voice steady, but with an edge of resolve. "We're living. We have the opportunity to build something that matters, not just for the bottom line, but for the people we affect, for the future. We can still be profitable, but we need to change our focus. This merger won't solve everything." Gregory's face twisted in frustration. "You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. The empire we've built, Adam, the one that's made you who you are, it's not just about ideology. It's about control, about dominance. You're choosing to walk away from that." Adam took a slow breath, meeting Gregory's gaze with quiet determination. "I'm not walking away from anything. I'm building something different. If you can't see that, then maybe I'm not the man you think I am." Gregory's lips pressed into a thin line, and he stood up abruptly. "You've changed, Adam. I don't know who you're becoming, but this isn't the company I signed up for. You've made your choice. Now, so have I." Without another word, Gregory turned and walked out of the room, leaving Adam alone with his thoughts. Later that evening, After the meeting had ended, and the weight of his conversation with Gregory had settled into the pit of his stomach, Adam found himself at Bridgewater Foundation again. The building was a quiet haven, a place where he felt like he could breathe. Emma had invited him to join her for dinner, and the thought of seeing her, of having her steady presence beside him, brought him a sense of calm he had been desperately craving. When he arrived, Emma was waiting for him in her office, her desk cluttered with papers and files. She looked up as he entered, her face lighting up with a warm smile, the kind that always made Adam's heart skip a beat. "Adam," she said softly, standing up from her desk. "How was your day?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've had better days," he admitted, his voice carrying the exhaustion that had built up over the course of the day. "Gregory and the board are pushing back harder than I thought they would. I'm starting to realize that this isn't going to be as simple as I hoped. I'm walking a fine line here, Emma." Emma stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face with concern. "I know it's hard. I can see it in your eyes, the weight of it all. But you can't do this alone. You don't have to carry it all by yourself." Adam looked at her, her presence grounding him in a way nothing else could. "I know," he said, his voice softening. "But every choice I make feels like it's going to cost me something. My relationships, my future, everything." "Adam," Emma said, her hand gently resting on his arm, "you're not losing yourself in this. You're building something. It's not easy, but it's worth it. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take it one step at a time." Adam closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. He had been so focused on the big picture, on changing the world, that he had forgotten how to simply live in the present, to enjoy the quiet moments of connection that truly mattered. He had been so afraid of losing everything that he hadn't realized that what he was building with Emma was worth more than anything else in his life. "I don't want to lose you, Emma," Adam whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't want to lose this." Emma smiled softly, her eyes filled with warmth. "You won't lose me, Adam. Not if you're willing to fight for what really matters." As they sat down for dinner, the tension that had plagued Adam all day seemed to melt away. They talked about the future, about the work Emma was doing with the foundation, and about their shared hopes for what they could build together. But beneath their words, there was an unspoken understanding. The road ahead was uncertain, but they were in it together. And for the first time in a long time, Adam felt the weight on his shoulders lift, not because the challenges were gone, but because he didn't have to face them alone. In the quiet of the evening, as they shared a simple meal, Adam realized something that changed everything. He wasn't alone anymore. He had Emma. And with her by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that love, not legacy, was the foundation he would build his future on. The next morning, as Adam prepared for another round of meetings, he took a moment to reflect on what had shifted in him. He no longer felt trapped by his past, by the legacy of wealth and power that had once defined him. Now it was about choice. It was about building something real, something that wasn't just a reflection of his father's empire, but a testament to the life he was creating with Emma. The future was still uncertain, the board still resistant, but Adam Carson was no longer afraid of the price of change. He knew that the only thing worth holding on to was what he was building with her, and for the first time in his life, he was ready to give it all. The days following Adam's commitment to change were a strange mix of quiet determination and increasing pressure. The road ahead was unclear, and the stakes were higher than ever. His decision to shift Carson Enterprises away from its aggressive growth model and toward sustainability had shaken the very foundation of the company. The board, already uneasy, was now more vocal in their opposition, their meetings growing longer and more heated with every passing day. Adam had always been the one to make the tough calls, to steer the ship with unwavering confidence. But this time he wasn't just making decisions about profit margins and market shares. He was making decisions about who he wanted to be, both for himself and for the company. He was trying to create a world where purpose and integrity came before power, and the weight of that responsibility was starting to feel crushing. One evening, after another exhausting round of meetings with the board, Adam found himself walking through the bustling streets of San Francisco. The city, with its towering buildings and endless possibilities, had always been a place of ambition, a place where the future seemed limitless. But tonight it felt different. The weight of the empire he was trying to change pressed down on him, the uncertainty of his future more tangible than ever. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his messages. The last one was from Emma. "I know you've had a long day. Meet me at the park? I think we both need a breath of fresh air." The simplicity of her message, the kindness, the quiet understanding that always came through in her words, was a balm to his weary soul. He didn't need to say anything more. She understood. She always had. When Adam arrived at the Golden Gate Park, the cool evening air was just beginning to settle in, the sky turning soft shades of purple and orange as the sun dipped behind the hills. Emma was waiting by the old oak tree they had visited many times before. She looked as peaceful as ever, her hair swept by the wind, her eyes filled with that calm certainty that had drawn him to her from the very beginning. She smiled when she saw him, a smile that made Adam's heart skip, reminding him that despite the chaos around him, this connection with her, was real. "Hey," she said softly, her voice warm, like the last breath of summer. "I thought you could use a break." Adam nodded, stepping closer to her, his gaze never leaving hers. "I didn't think I'd need one, but I've been running on empty lately. The board, they're not taking the changes well. It feels like I'm fighting a battle I can't win." Emma reached out, placing her hand on his arm, the touch grounding him in the way she always had. "You're not alone in this, Adam. And you don't have to win every battle. Sometimes the hardest part is just deciding what's worth fighting for." Her words were a reminder of the very thing he had been struggling to hold on to. What was it all for? The empire? The wealth? Or was it for something more, something that couldn't be measured by stock prices or boardroom approval? "I've been so focused on making everything perfect, on making sure everything succeeds," Adam said, his voice thick with frustration. "But in the process, I've been forgetting why I'm doing this, why I'm fighting. I want to build something meaningful, something that isn't just about money. But every time I take a step forward, it feels like I'm taking 2 steps back." Emma's hand slid gently from his arm to his hand, intertwining their fingers. "You don't have to do this alone. You've already made so much progress, Adam. You're creating something that matters. It's not going to happen overnight, but I believe in you. I believe in the vision you're building." Adam closed his eyes for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. She was right. He had made progress, even if it didn't always feel like it. The pressure from the board, the media, his own doubts, they were all part of the process, but none of it would matter if he couldn't find peace in the choices he was making. "I don't want to lose what we have," he whispered, opening his eyes to meet hers. Emma's gaze softened, her lips curving into a gentle smile. "You won't lose me, Adam. But you need to be honest with yourself. You're building something with your heart, not just your mind. Don't let fear of failure control you." Adam's chest tightened as he looked at her, his heart aching with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. How had he gotten so lucky? To find someone who not only believed in him, but also believed in the vision he was trying to create, not just in business, but in life. Later that night, after a quiet walk through the park, Emma and Adam sat on a bench beneath the canopy of stars. The world around them seemed to fall away, the noise and chaos of the city fading into the distance. Emma had always been able to help him ground himself, to see beyond the superficialities of his world. And for the first time in a long time, Adam felt a sense of calm. "You've been my anchor through all of this," Adam said quietly, his voice low but filled with sincerity. "I don't know what I would do without you, Emma. You've shown me what it means to live with purpose, to live for something greater than just success." Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with warmth and affection. "And you've shown me that success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you become along the way. We're in this together, Adam, whatever comes next." The weight of the decision, of all the uncertainty that loomed ahead, seemed to lessen with her words. Adam realized in that moment that the battle he was facing wasn't about whether he would win or lose. It was about what kind of man he wanted to become. And with Emma by his side, he finally understood that he didn't need to face it alone. The next day, Adam called an emergency meeting with the board. He knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. He wasn't going to back down from the changes he had put in motion, not because it was the easy path, but because it was the right one. As he stood in front of the board members, his gaze sweeping across the room, he felt a quiet strength surge within him. He wasn't the man they had once known, the man who played by their rules, who answered to their expectations. He was someone different now, someone who knew that real power didn't come from wealth or dominance. It came from making decisions that aligned with his values, from creating something that mattered. "I'm not asking you to agree with me," Adam said, his voice steady, "but I am asking you to trust me. This company can still grow, but we need to change how we define success. We need to build something that isn't just about money. It's about legacy, purpose, and doing right by the world around us. I'm asking you to take a chance on that." The room was silent for a long moment, the tension palpable. But then, slowly, Rachel spoke up, her voice filled with a new respect. "You've always known how to lead, Adam. Maybe it's time to lead us in a new direction." Adam nodded, his heart lifting with a quiet sense of relief. It wasn't the approval he had wanted, but it was a step toward the future he had chosen, one built not on fear, but on love and purpose. As the meeting adjourned, Adam felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with resistance and setbacks, but he was no longer afraid. He knew without a doubt that he was on the right path. And with Emma by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow over the city skyline as Adam stood by the large windows of his penthouse. Outside, the streets of San Francisco were alive with activity, but inside, there was a peace he had never known. The weight of the past few months, the struggles with the board, the pressure of trying to balance his father's legacy with his own vision, had all led to this moment. He had made the choice, finally, and it had been hard, more difficult than anything he had ever done in his life. He had risked everything for a chance to build something real, something that mattered, a future that wasn't just about wealth or power, but about purpose and love. And that future, for the first time, didn't feel like a sacrifice. It had been a month since that pivotal meeting with the board, and while things had settled into a new normal, Adam still found himself reflecting on how far he had come. The changes he had implemented at Carson Enterprises were taking root, slowly but surely. The resistance had not been easy to overcome, but one by one, the board members had come to see the value in his vision. Profits were still strong, but more importantly, the company was starting to focus on long-term sustainability, on community impact, and on ethical business practices. It wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges ahead, but Adam knew that he had made the right choice. He had chosen to build a legacy based on integrity, not just on the numbers in a balance sheet. And though it had cost him some relationships and shaken the foundations of his business, he had gained something far more valuable. He had gained himself. As the evening light filtered into the room, Adam turned away from the window and looked toward the door, where Emma stood, her smile as warm as ever. She was wearing a soft green dress, the kind that fluttered gently in the evening breeze, and her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail. There was a quiet confidence in her step, a strength that had been there from the beginning, but now, more than ever, it felt like a reflection of the woman he had come to admire deeply. "Is it time?" Emma asked, her voice soft but carrying an undertone of excitement. Adam smiled, walking over to her. "Yes, it's time." Tonight wasn't just another evening in their busy lives. Tonight, they were going to announce a new chapter, not just for Carson Enterprises, but for themselves. A new initiative, a partnership between the company and several nonprofit organizations, would be unveiled to the public. It wasn't just a corporate announcement. It was a statement. It was the culmination of everything Adam had worked toward over the past few months. A future where profit and purpose didn't just coexist, but thrive together. Adam had invited some of his closest colleagues, board members, and philanthropists to the event. But the most important part wasn't the ceremony or the media coverage. It was the message they would send to the world. They were shifting the narrative of success, showing that there was more to life than the chase for power. And Emma was standing beside him, her support unwavering, as she had been from the very beginning. As they arrived at the venue, a chic event space overlooking the bay, Adam felt a surge of pride mixed with nervous excitement. This wasn't just a business event. This was the first real step toward living the life he had promised himself. A life where love, integrity, and purpose led the way. Emma took his hand as they walked through the crowd of well-dressed guests, smiling and chatting. Adam's gaze met hers, and in that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Adam wasn't afraid. He had a vision, and it wasn't just for the company. It was for the life they were building together. As the speeches began, Adam stood by Emma's side, his heart full as he watched her speak to the crowd about the importance of ethical business practices and social responsibility. She was the anchor in his life, the one who had challenged him to think beyond the numbers and the bottom line, to understand the human side of success. She had shown him that love and purpose weren't just ideals. They were powerful forces that could change the world. When the event ended, the guests began to trickle out, congratulating Adam and Emma on the success of the evening. Adam watched as Emma talked to a group of donors, her passion for the cause radiating through her every word. As he stood there, silently observing her, he felt a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. This wasn't just a victory for the company. It was a victory for both of them, for the future they had created together. As the last of the guests left, Adam approached Emma, who was standing by the door, her face illuminated by the soft light of the setting sun. She turned to him, her expression softening as she took in his gaze. "You did it, Adam," she said, her voice full of admiration. Adam smiled, his heart swelling with emotion. "We did it." She stepped closer to him, wrapping her arms around him in a gentle embrace. "You're exactly who you were meant to be." Adam held her tightly, the weight of the past few months finally lifting off his shoulders. The road ahead wasn't easy, and there would be challenges. But tonight, as he held Emma in his arms, he realized that it wasn't just about the company, the empire, or the decisions he had made. It was about the journey they had taken together, the choices they had made to create something real. As he pulled back to look into her eyes, Adam knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Later that night, As they walked through the quiet streets of San Francisco, the city lights sparkling in the distance, Adam turned to Emma, his voice full of certainty. "I don't need the empire anymore," he said, his hand gently brushing hers. "I have everything I need right here." Emma's smile was the answer he had been hoping for. She didn't need words to tell him how she felt. Her eyes said it all. They had chosen this path together, and with every step Adam knew that this was the life he had always wanted. The life built on love, purpose, and the quiet strength of connection. The future now was theirs to shape, and together they would build a legacy that would last, a legacy that was far more valuable than anything wealth could buy. And for the first time in his life, Adam Carson knew that this was the true meaning of success,